Good morning. And it's a beautiful, I can say now, a beautiful May morning. Yeah, we've entered what feels like the eternal summer that we're about to go through here. So my name is Dr. Kimberly Macquarie, and I'm the Director of Community Programming and the co-director of the Innovation Labs here at the Dalí Museum. And it is one of my favorite duties every month to be able to open this signature lecture series. And we thank all of you for joining us, both here in our live audience and those who are joining us via our streaming audience on YouTube for our Coffee with the Curator. Today, we are going to be joined by my colleague, the Dalí School Programs Manager, Sumaya Ayad. Among her responsibilities here at the museum is our Junior Docents program, which she has led and grown over the past several years of its history. And in that time, this program has not just been a part of her duties, but has become a passion. And it's become a passion precisely because of the title of today's presentation, and that is the special impact that it has on its participants. And she's going to be joined to share a little bit of that impact live and right in front of you by some very special guests, our current and former junior docents. And together, they're going to be sharing a little bit about the program, what they do, what its impact is, as a celebration of its 40-year history. That's amazing. 40 years of junior docents, yes. We can give a clap for that. Woo! Amazing. Now, of course, before we get to the talk, we have some housekeeping to do, and that includes some very special thank yous. And the first thank you goes to the City of St. Pete for their support of this and other museum programs. Yep. And a big clap for yourselves, because without our members, nothing we do has any meaning. And we thank all of you members. Now, as the Director of Programming, I'd be remiss if I didn't share some of our upcoming events for May. As some of you might already be aware, May is birthday month for Salvador Dalí. Yes, he was born on the 11th of May. And all month long, we are going to be celebrating, both on May 11th, the day of his birthday, and every Thursday evening in May. So the first thing we have on the docket is May 2nd. We're going to be starting our Thursday nights in May. The cafe will have a drink special. We'll also have some lawn games outside and just a kind of more festive atmosphere in May to get people in the party spirit. On Friday the 3rd, we're going to have our Dome Night, Dalí Alive 360. For those of you who have been interested in just experiencing the Dome as a separate experience, that's your opportunity, first Fridays every month. And then on Sunday, we're going to have our Little Surrealist Tour, our Dilly Dally with Dalí, and our live music at the Dalí. We'll be back on the 9th for Thursday nights in May for celebrating Dalí's birthday. And of course, this will be our final poetry for the season in our Poetry at the Dalí series. So be sure that you're here. And then on the 11th, I don't know if having cookies with a mustache or singing happy birthday at 1:20 to celebrate Dalí's 120th birthday, getting henna tattoos in the shape of Dalínian symbols, or if you're not ready for that commitment, face painting. We're going to have just a plethora of opportunities for you to be festive around Dalí's birthday. And I'm going to see if we can also, in addition to singing happy birthday, get a rousing round of cumpleaños feliz. So that we can have a toast to our birthday boy on May 11th. And then on Wednesday, we'll also be doing our art and meditation. If you've never been, it's a really amazing way to see the links between art and our general health and well-being. And then Thursday the 16th, Thursday nights in May. And then back to Sundays, we're going to do yoga, another great program that mixes art and well-being. Our story time at the Dalí, and Dilly Dally with Dalí. And then rounding out the month, we'll have our last Thursday nights in May on the 23rd and the 30th. And we're going to have our first program in connection with our next special exhibit, If you haven't heard, our next special exhibit is going to be Reimagining Nature, Dalí's Floral Fantasies. And it's going to be amazing. Much like the drawing exhibit that we had recently, it's a great opportunity to kind of pull the curtain back and get a peek inside Dalí's brain and into his processes. And we're going to have an amazing pianist here who is going to be doing some improv piano pieces in connection with imagery from the exhibit. So it'll be a really unique opportunity. And of course, I hope you will be back on the first Wednesday of next month to join us with our wonderful Senior Curator of Education, Peter Tush, who is also the curator for the exhibit Reimagining Nature. Woo! And Peter will be giving the opening talk on that new exhibition. Now, today it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Sumaya. Sumaya joined the Dalí in February of 2022 as the school programs manager within the museum's education department. Having completed numerous museum internships in her undergraduate and graduate careers, she earned a master's degree in museum and cultural heritage studies from FSU. She previously held positions as a teacher and office manager at Nur Academy in Sarasota and as a STEAM education specialist at the Leonardo Museum in Salt Lake City, Utah. At the Dalí, she is the link between the museum and our K-12 schools, driving strategy for and overseeing student programs while also contributing to the educational initiatives of the museum. She manages 3 programs, Junior Docents, Fashion Design at the Dalí, and Teen Voices, in which she introduces students to the world of Dalí through a variety of artistic lenses. In addition to managing these programs, she's a co-facilitator with me in Innovation Labs, which are our professional development workshops driven by creative thinking and problem solving. She has a passion for continued education, which you are going to see in her presentation, inclusivity, and of course, art history. And she will be joined by some special guests who she will introduce and tell us a little bit more about. And that would be Anthony, Aria, Christopher, Jagger, Nalia, and Valeria. So please join me in welcoming these special guests.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for having me and for inviting me to give this talk on the special anniversary of the Junior Docent program, 40 years in here after our museum was opened in 1982. So we're 42 years into our museum's history. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to thank some of the educators who have most touched my life and guided me on my journey, pushed me on my journey towards art history, Dr. Neal, Dr. Barry, Dr. Dowell, and of course my AP art history teacher, Miss Patricia E. Johnston, who really started my love for all of this. So thank you to those educators who are definitely still with me today. And two, as Kim said, definitely you may see my passions come through for this program and for arts education, as I do very much get to see and feel the impact of these programs with the students. So I apologize at this time because my passion does usually come through in the form of tears. And I have not brought up any tissues yet, so ahead of time, I do have to apologize. I was not a junior docent myself, so I have to say that the nerves do still come through. But something that I love about our museum is our devotion to legacy. So when I was invited to present in this monthly lecture series, I was really enthusiastic about the chance to recognize this anniversary, these 40 years. However, in my research, I found that there were several possible start dates of the program, truly. One of which you will see here. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Let's see, we're at 85 right now, and somewhere in here it says, oh right, our 3rd annual Soapbox Docents. So I will say then that this resource on the screen does indicate 3rd annual, the first ever note of Junior Docents occurs in 1984. And I will say that part of our devotion to legacy is our plethora of institutional knowledge. And I first came across that 1984 date in a document written by our senior curator of education and my boss, Peter Tush. So, unless you were a junior docent in 1982, the agreed upon date for the start of Junior Docents, which actually, I should say, began as soapbox docents, is now 1984. Okay. Oops, pardon me. So when thinking about how to start my presentation, art's impact, anniversary, legacy, I didn't want to jump right into the history of the program because unless you are closely familiar with the Junior Docent program or other arts programs, especially those put on by museums, I thought that it would be more important to tell you exactly why you should care about an arts program. So I began posing a few questions to myself, maybe some things that could get you all on board, like maybe, well, when did people first start caring about art? Too big, too far back. Okay, so maybe when did people start caring to learn about art? Also pretty far back. So instead I'm asked the question, well, when did people start really caring about museum art programs? How about the history of museum education? And that brought me to the first ever public museum. Not as far back, right? Just 1683? So no, this is the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, UK. And I should say instead, rather than first public museum, it's the first identified public Western museum. But rather than going this far back, I will say that we have under an hour together. So I'm gonna get back to junior docents and say instead that, give a point that a lot of us are aware of, but maybe we don't often think about, and that's the issues of access within museums. Historically, museums have not been accessible to the general public. Something here that we teach in our junior docent program, our fun cartoon here. And with issues of access in museums, going back into the 20th century, we do see a great trend towards education. But really, in museums as a whole, it wasn't until, or rather I should say, even after collections of art and artifacts left the hands of kings and queens, it really took a very long time for museums to be open, accessible, and welcoming to laymen like you and I. So I have this very official timeline, the history of museums. Beginning with human history, going until now, and now I'm not an anthropologist, an art historian, so unless it has pictures, but you'll see that people have been collecting stuff for a long time. Most of human history. There was only this little gap here, maybe when we were too busy running away from things that we couldn't really collect. But then once we really settled down, we were able to display stuff. Again, a short period of time there before we decided that we wanted to show other people our stuff. But only our friends, only people like us. So here with museum education, that's when we get to our point of really allowing strangers to see our stuff. And that point really turned towards the 1990s, the 80s and 90s, which our program falls right in line with. So the first principle published in 1992 in this AAM, the American Alliance of Museums, Excellence and Equity, Education in the Public Dimensions of Museums, is to assert that museums place education in the broadest sense of the word at the center of their public service role. And as I said, the 90s is really when we see the shift. FSU professors Pat Villanove and Ann Rosen Love identify the 90s as a paradigm shift towards museum education, to say that we will be approaching how we give our art to different audiences in a different way. And I say, while engaging new audiences, while bringing new people into the museum, what better way to attract and retain visitors than through educational events and programs, such as those that we do so wonderfully here at the Dalí. And I will tell you that truly at the Dalí Museum, we have a mission of education. This is our mission statement here up on the board for you. And I'll even give ourselves a little pat on the back, not that I was around at this point, but I will say that our museum was really ahead of the curve in the 1980s. Our founders, the Morses, were so devoted to their docent program, especially as a way to be able to make Dalí accessible to the general public, to be able to bring his stories, the accounts that they had of spending time with him, the journals that they kept on vacations with him, to really bring those stories to them and allow them to communicate Dalí's world to the general public. So, with our mission statement like this, we really are an active resource for our community and the world at large. But if we didn't have a focus on education, this is really what our mission would look like. Generations to come would not be there. Events, exhibits, experiences, sure, we would keep our collection around, we would preserve it as museums did for centuries beforehand. But with the shift towards education, as the Dalí Museum does so well, we really are able to empower different people to own art, almost as their own. To say, yes, I'm a person of St. Petersburg, Florida, and the Dalí Museum is mine to an extent, as it was donated to us by the Morses. And that's what each of the students in our junior docent program really feel too. That's one of the things that I love so much when the kids get up front. They say, my name is, and my painting is. Of course, all the works are by Salvador Dalí, but they own these works for themselves. They give their own opinions, they study it, they want to build more and to do well and show that parts of themselves. So that's where we finally get into program creation. So when I initially planned the talk, I really wanted to get far, deep into history because I love history so much. Like who were the students in those first few classes? What were the scripts? Who were the people teaching it? But as I really started my research, I found that with a program that happened in the 80s, so many of my resources were going to be hearsay. So I'll touch some on the great resources that I did find and the wonderful stories that I heard from the people at our institution. And I'll tell you that most of the resources that I'll be sharing with you are from Dalí Museum newsletters, publications that were actually published at great variability, but still show a wonderful side of our museum, things that were shared with our members in the 80s and 90s that showed the love of this program then and that now exist for us all to continue on appreciating this program. I also have found a few different Tampa Bay Times references to the Soapbox Docent program, which really shows then the reach of this program into the community. So here we are. So this is from the Dalí newsletter in winter of 1990. And I had the unfortunate experience recently where I had just printed out some photos, from Walgreens. And even though they were from high school, because they were a printed photo for me, they felt so much older than they really were. And now working with these newspaper articles too, even though this is just 1990, for some reason it feels decades in the past. So I'm sorry if anybody knows this student, 1990 was not that long ago. But Soapbox Docents was a youth program that was really meant to bring Dalí not just to St. Pete, but to the school system in St. Pete. And that's really where it started so much differently than the program that we have today. And that it was run almost entirely by the schools. That it was teachers at several different South Pinellas County elementary schools who were partnering with museum docents and volunteers to bring the students for several sessions over the course of a few weeks to learn about selected Dalí works. And then on just one day in the year, they would have a Soapbox Docent Day. For a few hours in the morning usually, they would open the museum to the public. Well, as the museum was always open to the public, but they would especially open it up for the sake of people being able to hear these young docents and the ideas that they had about Dalí's work. And it was, although I could not find a photo of these poor kids made to stand up on soapboxes. So it was named for that sake. I've read accounts of the green painted wooden boxes, but have not actually seen pictures of them. But too, I read accounts of different wayfinding paths in the museum that they would stick neon tape along the gallery floors so that people could find their way from docent to docent on different occasions. Because on other iterations of the program, they would actually only have one docent up for 45 minutes at a time before cycling them out. So they would literally have to be standing on a soapbox for 45 minutes as people came by to ask them questions about the work. I think that our junior docents are at least happy that they get to stand on the floor now, but still, for our public tours on Fridays during the summer, they still do have to stand there for close to 45 minutes answering the questions of anybody who may come by. So the program was largely meant for 4th and 5th graders. Some of the schools that participated in these first 2 decades were Maximo, Bay Point, Bay Vista, Azalea, Perkins, and the St. Pete Challenge School. A lot of gifted programs especially are referenced as attracting these students, or rather being the students who are sought out to participate in this program. But then too, students who are at risk. The St. Pete Challenge School was one that noted far fewer dropouts with the students who had gone through this program for them. So those teachers would volunteer to lead and plan the day, and then our docents and volunteers would also step in. This is the December 1989 shot here, and by 89 we were doing personalized t-shirts. So a lot of the things that we did then, we do now, and you might see on stage with a few of our students, and it was very fun for me to be able to see those things that have really carried on in this program as I was doing my research here. So here, I wanted to give you a look at what a full newsletter would look like. You have a picture of some of our soapbox docents here with those personalized melting clock t-shirts, and one docent. We have a Get Surreal video winning prestigious award making mention there. And then on the left here, we have this work, or this newsletter is from August 2000, and something fun for me is recognizing docent names here. So I noticed Judith Overcash was one of the first docents to be teaching and leading this program. And then too, on the right side there, the January-February 1997 article references soapbox docents again. And there is that point that I was making about St. Pete Challenge School emphasizing the dropout prevention focus of the school. So really the soapbox docents, even in this 1997 article, were already making headlines as building students' self-esteem, a point that I'll touch on later with our USF study. So in the 1990s, as I said, we did have some Tampa Bay articles popping up with Soapbox Docent Program. And while this postcard is not from the 90s, it's actually circa 40s, it makes me feel just that same kind of nostalgia for, things being cheaper and better, basically. So the sunshine offer of the St. Petersburg, Florida. Tampa Bay Times in November of 1991 reported the Soapbox Docent Day coming up, and those students that year came from Bay Vista, Maximo, and Bay Point elementaries. And in that year of 1991, I will report that for seniors, our admission was $3.50, for adults, $5, and maybe we can implement some 40th anniversary pricing going on for this. I'll talk to some people about it. And then in 1997, Tampa Bay Times again referenced soapbox docents, but this time for St. Petersburg month-long celebration of downtown museums, Museum Month, that had participation from the MFA, Great Explorations, the Pier Aquarium, and then our Salvador Dali Museum featuring the soapbox docents. So again, very fun for me to see things that were going on back in the early 90s, happening still today. Arts Alive is something that the Dali Museum was very proud to take part in. Again, our free museum day, celebrating our downtown St. Petersburg museums. So that just really goes to show the legacy here at the Dali Museum. Again, we have another wonderful article. This one does reference the 45 minutes that the soapbox docents had to spend in front of their presentation or in front of their paintings. And then this note down here was fun for me. In this January 1992 article, they were guessing that in February, the museum will be visited by our 1 millionth visitor. So does anybody have any idea where we're at right now? Millions past. But here, we have some more of our teachers who are wonderful at leading this program. And with this being 92, we do see the shift towards the program coming out of the hands of teachers and more towards the docents towards the late 90s and early 2000s, and then back towards the teachers close to 2010. Here, again, we have another full-scale article. I'll go ahead and read. So by 98, instead of welcoming in some dozens and dozens of students from 3 different schools, we had now transitioned the program to be much more focused, with the school teachers helping only get the students to the museum, and rather the museum docents leading a small group of 12 Perkins students through the process of becoming a junior docent, selecting a painting, studying it, preparing a presentation, and then doing as much. So about 15, less than 20 years after the start of the program, we do really start to see a shift in how it was being taught, who was leading it, and exactly how we wanted to focus on all of our students. And then one of the last articles that I'll show is from 1999, and here we actually have the reference of the creation of that Get Surreal video that in a previous article was saying had won an award by that time. And then again, we have our more focused Perkins students becoming docents for a day in the middle there. And I had intended to pull up our Get Surreal video to give you a taste exactly of what the 90s were like at the museum, but it's a very different tone. So I will rather leave that link there and allow you all to find it on your own. But lastly, with this part of my research, I was just so, again, pleased to see things that we did then, things that we did now. I was introduced to Peter Meinke, the St. Pete and maybe Florida Poet Laureate, through our monthly museum poetry series. And here for our March and April 2001 museum newsletter, with April being National Poetry Month, we have a poem by Peter right there. And then 2, in 1998, we have another mention of our Student Surrealist Art exhibit, something that we still do wonderfully today. Currently, we're between shows. The Hillsborough show has just come down. We've expanded that program beautifully, too, since its inception. And now, instead of only exhibiting Pinellas student work, as I said, the Hillsborough show has just come down. And coming up by the end of the week is our statewide Student Surrealist show. So really showing all of our Florida students experimenting with Dalí and surrealism there. So, the program transformation. One of the best photos I could find of our junior docent teachers were from recent years. So this is myself and 4 of our staple teachers of the program. That's Dwayne Shepard, Linda Christian, Jen Moore, and John Stewart, out back in front of our mustache in our avant garden. And it was, I should say, between 2000 and 2007, the program evolved from soapbox docents to junior docents. And I'm not positive what the year was or what instigated the change. But I think that everybody's glad to be junior rather than be made to stand on a box. If that's the only difference, I think it's a positive one. But then in 2007, our education department, especially Peter Tush, was tasked with bringing in Pinellas County teachers, especially visual arts teachers, to rewrite the curriculum of junior docents, to match it up with our Sunshine State standards, and to really expand the program beyond just about 2 hours for a few days in a week to being a week-long summertime program. So that's where actually Jen Moore in the center was incredibly instrumental, and she was one of those first instructors hired for that purpose. By 2008, when this flyer is from, you can see that the museum transitioned fully. So it was a successful summer in 2007 to a full day program or almost full day program from 9:30 to 3:30 p.m. And that we were offering 3 full weeks in the summertime. Our pricing is a little bit different. It is actually, it's actually a little bit higher right now, but not much for the change between 2008 and 2024. Our pricing now is $225 for non-members and $200 for members, whereas in 2008 it was $200 versus $150. So we think that we are an extremely accessible program. Actually, we find that we are an extremely accessible program by reports of parents, by by the research that we've done in benchmarking with other local camps and things that they do over the summertime, that these prices are accessible to our families. But to one of the best things that we do with the Junior Docents is offer scholarships. 1/3 of all of our students each summer come to the museum completely free. Yes. And those students too are ones who absolutely need these programs, whose parents come to us and tell us if they have a financial need, if their student, or rather if their child just has a passion for art and the parent isn't able to make it work this summer. We absolutely meet parents in a way that they are able to bring their kids to our museum to have this worthwhile experience, an experience that we find really does build self-esteem, that enhances their self-concept, that gives them confidence and builds skills going forward into their lives. So that's one way that we bring more people in to our full-scale program here. We've actually added on even an additional hour now. Now we go from 9:15 to 4:15 each day, and then on Fridays a little bit later when we do our presentations. And we found that adding on an additional hour would even make our camp more accessible, something that we might explore, but as of right now, we're so proud to be able to offer almost a full workday camp for those parents who are working throughout the day and maybe not able to get over to drop off or pick up their students. I had to with this one. And really, starting at the museum, summer was the first program that I was going into with this Junior Docents art camp. And these 4 individuals just helped me gain so much confidence in leading the program and explaining the program to me and introducing me to the wonderful students who were already part of it. So now the way that we have transformed and expanded since that 2007 time of adding on more hours, of making it a week-long program, of inviting in students to the museum for this, we now have so much that we do in a week. And I could have zoomed in here, I could have formatted differently, but I just thought that this gave you a really great expanse of everything that we do in a week with our Junior Docents, because it's not just making art. It's not just learning about art. It's being introduced to the museum world. It's going on scavenger hunts so that you understand all of the different parts and departments in a museum. It's engaging in Jeopardy games so that you get to learn about different Dalínian symbols and history, things that Dalí lived through and incorporated into his works. So there are so many fun things, really, that we are fortunate to be able to incorporate into this week-long full program that maybe weren't there in just the 2-hour program that had been done previously in the decades of the 80s and 90s. And we're really finding that we're meeting needs that the school system doesn't have full capacity to meet too. So when the program did exist only in the hands of the school teachers and was only held for those 2 hours, while it was amazing to be able to build students' self-esteem and get them to learn about Dalí and present on that, now that we have this full program, we really see such a change in the students from the beginning of the week to the very end. And today we still do the things that we did then, as in practicing with our docents here. We have 2 students who actually met in the program and became best friends. These are the Bellas. If you're familiar with their program at all, you will have seen them in the last 5 years because they have some great legacy with the program, and they hopefully will be joining as junior docent ambassadors just as they start their first year of high school this year. May 1st is not a great date as far as testing goes, so maybe in the future they'll join us. But then too, our students are wonderful at embodying Dalí and really having fun throughout the week with us. Here we have our junior docent instructor, Dwayne Shepard. Making surreal art is absolutely still a staple within our program. And then this is so great that Laura Ermis actually is an instructor who was holding the program previously just in her classroom. So she was one who had taken the Herald on from one of the teachers who had taught it more than a decade ago at Jamerson Elementary, and then continued it on there. So now with her great knowledge of Dalí and experience with that, we have invited her to teach for our summer program. And on that note, I'll touch on our program expansion. I had mentioned earlier our scholarship program, and then the fun too that the students have here. This was actually, I'll go back for 2 slides, the plates that you see students painting right here are then going to be folded up and made into these geodesic dome sculptures, which the students then had a fashion show with. As they began putting them on their heads and strutting around the rooms, cameras came out, music was turned on, and then when it was time for the photo op, they all decided to cover their face. Because it's, you know, when the adult wants the photo, it's not fun anymore. But still, we do have a lot of fun with the students, and they definitely give us a lot of laughs throughout the weeks with them. And two, our scholarship program is something I wanted to touch on again, just with this photo right here. It's something, too, that has evolved. There was no cost to the program when it initially started in the 80s and 90s, but then as students were brought into the museum, there was a small cost of $45 involved, and just at any moment that somebody came to our educators and said, my child wants to partake in this program, I want to put them in this program, but we're not able to afford it, we waived the fee. It's incredible that, you know, no questions asked, absolutely, you want to partake in an art program, we will allow you to partake in an art program. But then we decided to expand the program because we found that with the offer of scholarships, we wanted to meet different audiences. We wanted to meet the students whose parents weren't on the outlook for arts education programs, who maybe weren't able to get them here. And that's where we brought in Big Brothers Big Sisters, because with their organization, they actually have the capacity to bring students to and from the museum, to advertise the program directly to students and families who we might not otherwise reach. And from Big Brothers Big Sisters, we actually took the Herald back ourselves and said, you know, we can reach these students too. Now that you've let people know about our program, and now that we are expanding our reach with this program, we will be able to offer 1/3 of all attendees a scholarship, fully funded for them to come for the week. And I believe that the program will continue to evolve because those scholarship students are some of the best that we have. And they are ones too that come back year after year, not because it's free, but because they value the program so much. They value this program so much. And that is what you will feel when you hear these junior docents. When you feel the power that comes out of them, you will understand why the parents want to send their kids every summer to the Dalí Museum. You will understand why the students want to come back. To be able to say that you partook in a presentation like this in front of people like you, but then too, over the summertime, up in the galleries, when you have strangers coming through the museum, it's an incredibly empowering thing to be able to say. At 9 years old, 10, 11, even now at 17. It's amazing to be able to say and be able to feel that, to own that yourself. And two, we were able to expand the program as we found that these young students were connecting so well with Dalí to teen docents. So these are some students from Osceola Fundamental, learning, creating art, inspired by Dalí, learning from our senior curator, Peter Tush. These photos come from these students' instructor at Osceola Fundamental, Mr. John Stewart. one of our regular junior docent instructors over the summertime now, who teaches an incredible writing lesson each week of the program, because we find that starting with a writing lesson really gets these kids in the right mindset for writing a presentation. We expanded the program outside of our summertime program to Osceola Fundamental High and Thurgood Marshall Fundamental Middle School, this fundamentally surreal collaboration where middle and high school students were working together to learn about and present Dalí's works. And that was John Stewart at Osceola Fundamental, and then his wife, Sheila Cowley, at, Sheila. Cowley's in the back of my head. Sheila, who works at Thurgood Marshall Fundamental Middle. And then here they had great fun on opening day of the museum in 2011, representing different figures from the hallucinogenic Toreador especially. In the last year or so, we have been expanding the program back into the classrooms. So now students who aren't able to spend the summertime with us instead do partake in the program in their art focus groups in three different elementary schools this year, one of which is Perkins Elementary. And they had, as you saw, taken part in the program previously in the 90s. And now they had a dozen students back again to present on Dalí's work. This was just a few weeks ago. And another part of their program is that they expanded to cookie decorating and other creative outlets, which you see in the hands there. At Lanier Elementary over in Hillsborough, we had a wonderful avant-garden opening. So these students took on the program in a way that they would never visit the museum, actually. They learned about each of Dalí's works and some of his symbols all on their own in the classroom, and then created this garden with QR codes that each led to a video of the students giving a presentation about a Dalínian symbol. And we have that egg chair there, some artwork on display, some Dalínian symbol painted rocks, and a really great job for students done there, and their teacher, Cherise Curtis. And too, I loved this. They had been engaging in some different thought activities, this one with the Ecumenical Council. And this Naima in second grade says, "I see Dalí painted himself, his wife, little people, a woman, and a bird. It makes me think everyone is in heaven. It makes me feel confused and disturbed because of the strange figures and what they are doing. It reminds me of when I sleep and I have a weird vision that doesn't last a long time. When I wake up, I wonder what it was." Very Dalínian, Naima, very Dalínian. And these students, even at a second grade level, are really able to engage with and connect with Dalí. Here we have Jamerson Elementary, one of the longest running junior docents in the classroom programs. Again, teaching a fifth grade student, teaching fourth graders here. And one of my favorite things to see with this program are the junior docents then engaging the other people in the museum, just our regular audience members, adults coming up to them, asking them questions, exactly what they think about the piece, why they enjoyed the piece, and the students being empowered and having that confidence to give their opinion, to give a solo presentation to a complete stranger while the fourth grade class is wandering around the other side of the gallery is something that makes me incredibly proud. And we really believe, and we have measured that we are building skills for tomorrow. This student had me in stitches while he was complaining to this group that he had to stand in front of his painting waiting for each of the tour groups to come through. They said, "Well, don't you have a snack with you or anything?" He said, "Well, I see the cafe downstairs, but they wouldn't let me bring any food up here." So at the end of the tour, this gentleman here pulls out his wallet and says, get yourself something from the cafe because of that great presentation. I had to tell the student that normally all of our docents give tips back to the museum as a donation, but I let him keep it. But really, this student had so much confidence, and he was somebody that I enjoyed, that these people enjoyed watching give this presentation, because analyzing a surreal work of art, preparing a presentation, owning it as theirs, and delivering it to others, most of whom are complete strangers, no matter the time of year now that you partake in this program, or no matter the years in the past that you partook in this program. These are really empowering experiences to have as a kid in elementary and middle school. And that's what this program is about. Each of these kids are trying to figure out who they are and who they can be. And I would say that most of us, or at least myself, is also still trying to figure that out. But telling young students that they're as capable as adults, that they should have confidence in themselves, that they're well equipped for their future, and that they can take these things from our program with them for the rest of their lives are definitely things that we feel and see coming out of the Junior Docent program. And we know it, as I said, with this USF research study, The Effects of a Museum Art Program on the Self-Concept of Children, published in 2014. We had 176 children from the greater Tampa Bay area enrolled in the Junior Docent program for this. It was the 1-week program at this point, summers 2010 through 2012. They did not study the same student more than once, despite us having several repeat students. Of course, as you know, one of the best things about our program is welcoming them back year after year. And we had an average age here of 10 years. Students partook in pre and post studies, a 20-question survey, and this came after a first set of surveys done in 2007 and 2008, just about students' enjoyment of the program, about their knowledge of Dalí, about whether or not they would like to partake in this program again. And those were the same researchers who then went on to complete this study, because as they spent time in our museum, as they spent time with this program, they saw real value in it. They saw that they could study the increase of self-esteem in a child in this program. And that's something that we now have the numbers to back up. But something, too, that is really important about this study is that most other studies published about the effects, the impact of an arts program, are about arts therapy programs. And they're also largely about medical ailments and the ways that arts programs benefit us in that way. But instead here, we're looking at children in an arts education program and just how it builds their self-esteem. So these were some of the things that were studied, and it is hard for me to understand completely too in this graph. So I would direct you instead to this side to best understand the types of things that they were looking at and measuring with these 20-question surveys. And after you take a moment to soak that all in. They did see significant increase in the pre and post-test surveys done with the students. They did not see significant increase in differences of age or gender. They found that all students were feeling the same effects from this program. Oops. And those programs, and those effects were especially about eliminating the negative, and that goes back to our negative self-talk about how do you feel when you hear the statement, "I am a bad person." And we found that students, after engaging in this program, were less likely to identify with that statement. So that's one way that we're able to see that increase in self-esteem, higher satisfaction with self-image, better perception of how others view them, and two, how they internalize that, feel it for themselves, and then act on it too in their academics. And in their academics, I will say that we are extremely proud to put on this program because public school systems are not as able to focus on these types of skills because what gets measured is what gets funded. In my time in the Florida school system, we took the FCATs. Then students I was teaching were taking the FSA. Now we're at the FAST now. So there are several different iterations of all these tests, 2 programs that are evolving. But we do see those as important benchmarks and for ourselves, we're very, very proud to be able to meet the needs of building these skills that maybe the school system isn't able to focus on. We have the Pinellas and Hillsborough art supervisors sit on our education committees to be able to advise us about our programs, and us too to be able to support them in their public schools, and they are up against it, up against what they're able to offer for the arts, up against funding because of all of these benchmarks that need to be met. All of the testing, the standardized points that our school systems are looking towards. So we are very proud to partner with them instead. But I'll say that as far as skills for tomorrow goes, Dr. Kim mentioned our innovation labs, our professional development, creative workshops, and thinking about our futures. And here she uses this graph to be able to say that creative thinking is the #1 skill on the rise between 2023 and 2027 in what people are hiring for. But does the program really work? We have to say, yes, it does, absolutely. She just ran out of the room, but Joy Garrett-Douglas is our wonderful Education and Community Program Associate at the Dalí Museum. She has been referenced a few times. Okay, do I have to like, I can't keep on. Okay, great. Okay, that was okay, good. Just a little hiccup, that's fine. Okay. And she is somebody, of course, who went through our Junior Docent program. Also, somebody who volunteers with me every summer is one of our instructors' sons, Milo Moore. He has been accepted into UCF. He will be starting there this summer and has earned several scholarships with a wonderful letter of recommendation based on his time as a junior docent and junior docent teen volunteer. So we're extremely proud of him that he also was a junior docent. A little bit different looks here. Now, I have 2 more exceptional students to show before we get on to our ones right down here. Somebody who still has junior docent listed in extracurriculars on their resume is Matteo Maroulier. And 3 times. And he now is an investment associate and relationship manager over at Sable Trust. And here he is in his prime years at the Dalí Museum. This is actually a photo from when he was volunteering with his mom who was working here. And then at the old museum with his brother Aiden there in that paper mache giraffe. What you don't see, what I cropped out, are the plastic bags of materials that they're carrying too for this volunteer project. And somebody who I'm extremely close with is Jess Piatti, who was a junior docent, then junior docent teen volunteer, and is now a Pinellas County art teacher. She will be joining the museum for her first summer as a full-time instructor with the junior docent program. And here she is in her classroom, and here she is as a little junior docent in our Raymond James room here just in about 2012. So rather than make some more grandiose points about the impact of art, I will get off my soapbox and introduce our junior docents. The first of whom presenting are Nalia and Valeria. Nalia and Valeria were friends outside of Junior Docent Art Camp, and Valeria had come to us previously and invited Nalia another summer to join her. And now both of them are signed up to come back with us this summer, and they actually inaugurated this Junior Docent Ambassadorship earlier this year at our Keepers of the Collection event, in which they dazzled some of our donors with this presentation. So please join me in welcoming Nalia and Valeria to the stage.
Hi, my name is Valeria,
And I'm Nalia, and today we're going to be presenting the painting Nature Mort Vivant.
or Still Life Fast Moving. First, we'd like to thank you all for coming, and we're both very grateful to present such a magnificent painting. Still Life Fast Moving was made by Dalí in 1952 when he was 1956 when he was 52 years old. He used this graph to help organize the movement throughout the painting. If you look at the center, you'll see that the knife perfectly cuts the painting diagonally in half, and up in the gallery, you'll be able to see the original pencil line under the blade of the knife. In addition, Dalí was also fascinated by spirals, and you can see them multiple times in this painting. For example, in the upper left-hand corner, you can see Dalí's hand, which has paint under its fingernails, holding a rhino horn. He did this because rhino horns have spirals in them, and Dalí believed that spirals are nature's most perfect form. Below that, you'll see a railing with one significant pole. This pole is supposed to depict the DNA image created by Crick and Watson in 1953, and when you go up to the gallery, you have to climb up a spiral set of stairs that look very similar. More to the right, you'll see a bird, and this is actually a stuffed bird from Dalí's office. Dalí was a very eccentric person, and he collected even more eccentric things. So he had this bird in his office, and he just decided to add it into the painting. As well, it also contributes to the title because the glass bottle next to it is moving, but the bird is still. Below that, you'll see a leaf and a wine glass, and the leaf is a grape leaf, which contributes to the wine, and also relates to the title because the leaf is still and the wine glass is like moving. I will now be giving it over to Nalia to explain the right side of this painting.
Thank you, Valeria. This painting ended Dalí's Surrealism period and began his nuclear mysticism period. Surrealism is the art of the unconscious. It's like something that you would find in a dream. On the other hand, nuclear mysticism is more literal, having to do with math, science, and physics. Dalí got his inspiration from this painting by Floris von Schutten. As you can see, the tables are very similar. If you look above the table, you'll see what a lot of people mistake to be a broccoli is actually a cauliflower. This cauliflower represents the bombs in Japan in World War II, which Dalí was very upset about. The cauliflower also has another spiral in it. If you look above the cauliflower, you'll see 2 cherries, 2 plates, and 2 apples. These all contribute to the title, Still Life Fast Moving, because one of them is moving and one of them is still. You can tell one of them is still because of the shadow it casts behind it. If you look back down at the table, you can see that some of the designs have shadows behind them and some of them don't. Dalí was one of the most amazing artists of his time, and we thank you all for coming, and we greatly appreciate this opportunity. I'm Nalia.
And I'm Valeria.
Thank you.
Now, we will open it up for a whole group Q&A at the end, but if anybody has questions about this specific work for Nali and Valeria, we can pass them to them now. Yeah, yes. Anthony.
Why did you guys choose this painting?
Honestly, it's because we were not fighting, but we each wanted to do different paintings, and I wanted to do a bigger painting, and she wanted to do a different bigger painting, and we just settled on this one because it was neither of our first choices, but it was something that we could both agree on, and we both thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and like the more you look at this painting, you understand it because the title has more significance than you think. Because each item here, if you really look at it, one is always moving and one is always still, and I think Dalí is very intelligent for that.
Thank you. That was really great. And actually, I have not practiced with or seen Nali and Valeria's presentation since that Keepers of the Collection event back in February. So that's another skill that we're teaching, is that wonderful memorization. Coming up next is a little bit the different flavor for our junior docent presentations. These two students both wanted to present on Lobster Telephone last summer, and it's one presentation, or rather it's one work that we had told students there's not so much to say about it, not that much visually going on to interpret, and usually we only save the very large pieces, such as Nature Mort Vivant, for duos. But Christopher and Jagger made a pretty good case for it, and you will see why as they present a Lobster Telephone. So please join me in welcoming Christopher and Jagger to the stage.
Why? Shallow? Shallow? Could you tell me more about this seafood catastrophe?
Oh, hello there. I see you wish to speak to me.
Why, yes, of course.
Why, I created a sculpture of a telephone, you see?
Is it by chance a lobster telephone?
Why, yes, of course. Dali only makes the most sensible of creations. Would you like to learn more about the lobster telephone?
Nah.
Vámonos.
Fine.
I constructed this piece back in 1936. I was looking amazing, as I always do. I can't believe it. I was only 32 back then.
Wait, how old are you?
Don't you know never to ask a woman her age? Shame.
Well, what inspired you to create this piece?
Oh, I remember it like it was only 9 decades ago. You know, a few friends and I were having lobster for dinner that night. We threw around the lobster shells, and one I threw landed on a telephone. And I had two bright ideas came to mind. One, I was going to take a career path in the NBA.
But what was the second idea?
I was going to create a sculpture of a lobster telephone.
So that's how it all happened.
Why, yes, of course. What with all these questions? What do you think we are? A museum? Oh, wait.
I think I remember hearing this is an homage to someone.
Oh, why, yes, of course. You know, this is an homage to Vincent van Gogh. Because if you were to put the lobster telephone up to your ear, you know, just snip it right off. What a crazy guy. Too much to make such a drastic appearance to your face.
Well, I guess you could say he couldn't hear that joke coming from a mile away.
That was the bee's knees. You know, no, my bad. The lobster telephone is part of a genre of art called surrealism, the art of the unconscious. You know, I once famously said, whenever I go to a restaurant, I ask for a grilled lobster, but I'm never served a cooked telephone. Crazy.
So there could be a world where I'd have to put a lobster to my ear to talk to someone?
Maybe, just maybe. No, I used to sleep with a spoon in my hand. When I woke up, I dropped the spoon and draw my dreams. I was expelled from school, actually. It was horrible. They said I was trying to draw attention. I took that quite literally. They called me a failure, but my heart didn't until it did.
You know, I had a dream once where I was just like you, Dalí.
Wow. Keep dreaming. Maybe one day you could be Picasso, but never the great Salvador Dalí.
Well, thanks anyways for telling me about this carving.
No problem. My name is Salvador Dalí.
And I'm Jagger Reba.
You're welcome.
Does anybody have any questions about this work of art?
Present.
And again, we will do whole group questions at the end.
I know one of you guys has a question.
Oh, okay, I see how it is.
Where can I buy one of these?
We sell them around, $2 million a piece. We just take a piece out.
Why, young lady, you know when you go to Publix, you know how they sell the little lobsters? I'm pretty sure you can get them there.
Yeah.
How about you, Sonny?
It's connected. Wireless. My bad. You, sir?
Well, because I really like lobsters, you know?
I was hungry.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Christopher and Jagger. Now, the age of our junior docents is something that always impresses us. And while we are a year later from the time that I met our next student, Aria, I have to say that at that time, when I read her writing, I had to look at her and say, "You're 10?" Now she is 11, so now it makes sense. But no, at 10 years old, at 11 years old, we are so fortunate to be able to put a little bit of a mark on that and say, oh, maybe this student is so exceptional because of their time in our junior docent program. So please join me in welcoming Aria to the stage as you will see her exceptionality.
Hello, I'm Arya Taraski, and this is The Discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. It was made in 1958 by Salvador Dalí when he became very interested in Christopher Columbus for the reason that he heard that Christopher Columbus was from Spain, not Italy, where it had been originally thought. You can see Christopher Columbus holding a banner with Gala portraying the Virgin Mary, where he's holding her like a saint. If you follow the trail of the fabric down, you can see a cloaked figure at the bottom that is actually Dalí in disguise, worshiping Gala because of how much he loved her. Whenever you look at Christopher Columbus, you can see that he's taking a step onto what you would think to be America. This also symbolizes the first steps on the moon that happened in 1968 to 1969. If you looked at the other cloaked figure in the bottom of the painting, that is Gala. It portrays the fact that Gala did not want to be seen when Dalí was very famous. If you take your attention to the bottom left of this painting, you can see a saint. This is Saint Narciso. He was a saint in one of the church that you could see to his right. Whenever Dalí was very interested in science, he knew that everything was simply made of atoms. Nothing was quite solid. He was very interested in this fact, so he drew Saint Narciso coming apart into these atoms. He's also coming apart into crosses and nails. The crosses represent his very religious side, and the nails represent when Jesus was nailed to a cross. This church that you see to his right was the church that he was buried in, with flies around it. You could see very similar flies in the hallucinogenic Curator, because these flies drove away the French twice when the French attacked this church. If you go back over to where you can see Gala, you see a bunch of banners. These are from the Parade of Saints that are connected to the flies. The cross that Dalí is holding, the cross of St. John, can actually be seen 3 times in this painting. One he is holding, one is at the top made of spears that are seen in Velázquez's painting that was made over 200 years beforehand. You could see the same spears. This is also the same reason why Dalí put himself inside of his painting, just as Velázquez did. That's the second cross, and the third one is very interesting. It's shown on the banners, but in order to see it, you have to see the painting upside down, using Ben-Day dots or comic book dots. If you bring your attention to the top of the painting, you can see 3 different scenes. One is Virgin Mary holding Jesus after he was nailed to the cross, and one is Christopher Columbus asking King and Queen for money to journey to find America. If you look to the bottom of the painting, you can see a sea urchin. This was one of Dalí's favorite foods. The rings around it are symbolizing whenever the Soviets launched the first satellite to move around the moon. Dalí was predicting that the first man would land on the moon in about 10 years or so. He was very correct. This painting was made in 1958, and the first man landed on the moon from America in 1969. Eleanor Moore, one of the main donators to the museum, called Dalí whenever he first made this painting and asked, "Why would you put that sea urchin there?" And Dalí simply would not give her an answer. Whenever the men finally landed on the moon, he called her back and said, "I finally understand why you put the oyster there." And Dalí said, "It took you 10 years to think like Dalí."
Great job, Aria. And then if anybody did have a specific question for Aria about this piece, we do have a microphone too, so that our streamers on YouTube are able to hear your question.
Why did you pick this?
The question was, why did you pick this painting?
When we were selected, I was first thinking about hallucinogenic Curator because I liked kind of the chaos of it. But then I was looking at this amazing masterwork that Dalí had created, and looking at it, I was very interested in a lot with social studies in school at that point. So I was thinking about the fact that I was thinking about Christopher Columbus, and I loved how there was hidden figures all throughout the painting, and there was a lot to understand about it. So it kind of had a lot of small details that were being able to point out. which with a lot of references, and I just overall thought the painting was really cool.
Awesome, great job, Aria. And last but not least, we have, instead of one of our current junior docents, rather than joining us this summer to present in our galleries, Anthony will be joining us this summer as a junior docent volunteer. He is a former junior docent and alumni of the program and quite a distinguished gentleman, even at the age of 17. He is dual enrolled currently as a junior in high school. He's dual enrolled at Seminole State College and at the University of Central Florida, already starting work on his bachelor's degree. When he first applied for the role of a teen volunteer with junior docents, he wrote amazingly about his career aspirations, and he's somebody who I hope to one day be voting for, because he was somebody who I really believe can be a great leader. Here in junior docents, he absolutely is. In the state of Florida, I believe he will be, and beyond. But it's just 17 right now, so welcoming to the stage, we have Anthony. And I'm not positive if Anthony needs the microphone.
But I'll use it. Hi there, I'm Anthony Cherenkov, and today I'll be presenting The Ecumenical Council by Salvador Dalí. It was painted in 1960, and it was painted using oil on canvas. Keep that in mind. Now, there's a lot going on here, but luckily enough for us, it's already been subdivided by that cross in the center. If you pay attention, you can see almost invisible lines coming out from each end. We'll start at the bottom, because there's a lot to say here. Now, at least for me, the first things that jump out are the images of Dalí and his wife, Gala. We'll begin with Dalí, since he had a high opinion of himself. So his inclusion here serves two different purposes. Firstly, it's a signature on the piece. He wanted everybody who took a look at this piece to know exactly who made it. And in doing so, it serves its second purpose. It's a reference to Velázquez, which, as was covered previously, he also liked to put himself in as his own signature. Now, the actual portrayal here is a little bit interesting. Note the canvas in front of him. It's blank. Now, there's a couple different things this could be about, but primarily for my interpretation of this painting, I think it's representative of a blank slate. And we'll touch more on what about that blank slate is when we get towards the center of the painting. Standing in front of him, we see his wife, Gala, acting as a muse, as always. But here, she's not representative of Gala, his wife. She's representative of Saint Helena, mother of Constantine. For those who don't know, Constantine was the first emperor of Rome who switched it over into Christianity. And in there, you can see a sort of new beginning, a new birth of Christianity. Standing next to Gala, we see a mountain. Now, that mountain may or may not have significance, but what is very important is its reflection. Now, see, this whole scene is set amongst a body of water which meets the horizon and reflects it down. But upon initial glance, you might be forgiven for thinking it's just clouds all the way down. That's because the clouds, or the heavens, are reflected almost perfectly. There's no ripple, there's no movement. But that mountain is drawn as if it's constantly in motion. And in fact, it is. See, that mountain is very earthly in nature, and as are all things, it is made of particles, atoms. They're always moving. Even this little stand right here seems solid enough, but it's constantly jittering, jottering. And as such, in the reflection of the water, he's shown things as they truly are. Now, ascending from the mountain, we see a chain of scenes. Now, this is all representative of one thing, just drawn 3 times. This was the coronation of Pope John the 23rd. And now, he was relatively significant, primarily because when he was coronated, he had one big goal. He wanted to talk to the Pope of Canterbury, an opposing papacy who had not been communicated with by the main church for some 400 years. If they were to talk, that would have constituted an ecumenical council, which is a gathering of church leadership to discuss doctrine. Now, the timeline here is rather interesting. See, Pope John was coronated in 1958. Dalí painted this piece in 1960, 2 years, makes sense. But that actual ecumenical council didn't happen until 1962. And it happened in St. Peter's Basilica. Keep that in mind. This was the new, fresh start to Christianity that Dalí was depicting with his blank slate, with the representation of St. Helena. And we'll actually see a fourth depiction of that scene up in that top right corner. It's a little hazy and it's a little bit hard to make out, but you can see the figures. Now, below those figures, we start to touch on the Holy Trinity who have been included in this painting. Underneath the figures, we see the Holy Spirit, represented both in spirit form, notice the hazy face, the little outline, and in bird form. Now, that bird, the white bird, is a common symbol for the Holy Spirit. Moving above that, we see a figure with their face covered. This is God. Dalí particularly covered God's face with the hand for one big reason. Dalí, contrary to common belief, had not seen the face of God, and as such, he did not want to portray it up here. But more interesting than God in this picture is the architecture that they're standing under. It's pretty distinctive. In fact, that's the St. Peter's Basilica, the very same place where that ecumenical council would be held 2 years later. Really makes you think, kind of like that Sputnik. Now, moving down, we see our final member of our Holy Trinity, that being Jesus. Now, unlike the other two, Jesus is portrayed as being made of these weird little squiggly lines. These are particles, once again, and they're here to denote that Jesus was born half man, had the human mother, Mary. Now, in one of Jesus' hands, we see him holding that cross, which has been cutting up the painting for us. But the other hand is of particular note. See, the position is almost defensive, like he's shooing something away. And if we follow up into that corner of the painting, we see more of those particles that Jesus is made out of. They seem to take on human shapes, and the leader of them is holding a cross, which at least in my mind immediately ties them to the papacy, the church. But they're not depicted like the rest of the cardinals in this piece. The rest of the cardinals that are in the center there are heavenly, they're pure, but up here they're hazy and distinctly human. Note that they're made of the particles. It's my personal interpretation that these are supposed to be representative of the evils of the church, which Dalí thought were distinctly human and were being cast out of the heavens by this new coronation. Now that's most of the manifest content in the painting, but before we wrap up, I'd like to share a little fun fact about this. When I was covering the materials, I said it was oil on canvas, and that's true, but I neglected to mention one important material, and that's octopus. See, Dalí had all sorts of fun ways to paint, and when he was making this piece, he happened to have a little cephalopod on hand, so he picked it up, dipped it in some ink, he slapped it right onto that top corner. You can still see the distinctive little tentacle mark right around the dove. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope that as you go forward here at the Dalí Museum, you'll look for more secrets and fun facts like that. Thank you.
Great job to Anthony. And does anybody have a question about this specific work? To Anthony.
In the top right there, the person isn't in another painting. Can't you see like their head?
God?
Yeah.
I'm not certain if Dalí has depicted God specifically. I know he's depicted Abraham Lincoln. That's a prominent face. But at least at this time, when he was rediscovering his love for religion after the discovery of the particle, which he believed to be very representative of God's existence, he thought, how can there be something so perfect and pristine without a maker to guide it? At least here, he didn't want to portray God's face.
What caused Dalí to have a love for religion again?
See, when the particle was discovered, Dalí was fascinated by it. He thought it was astounding that things which seemed so still could constantly be in motion. He thought it was unfathomable that everything was made of these just tiny pieces which seemed to link together and form into life, these inanimate objects which created humanity, animals, creatures, plants, everything. And he thought that there was no way something like that could just come into existence naturally. And as such, it served as a sort of reawakening, a reunion with him and God, because he's like, oh, there's proof that the big guy exists.
Thank you to each of our junior docent ambassadors here. Before we wrap up with our Q&A, I do just want to make my final points about in this 1984 40th year anniversary, looking back now of when our museum was instead looking towards the future. I do want to ask you instead to please trust me when I say that these skills, these memories, these experiences stay with these students. You've seen some great current junior docents, one former junior docent. If you meet somebody who's gone through our program, ask them about their experience with us, because it absolutely stays with them. And I would ask you too, think about how you spent your summers. Think about your favorite teacher, your favorite subject in school. What parts of those things still exist in you today? What parts of them make up your passions today? How did you work those things from the times that you were 10 years old into your adult life? And think about how these students in today's world are getting some of the best experiences here with our arts programs at the Dalí Museum. So I invite each of our students to actually come sit up on stage, just on the edge right here for our Q&A. I'll leave this up. And I have some mics to pass back to them, and I thank you all. I know that I have gone well over time, so if you do have any questions for me or for our junior docents, we would be very happy to answer them at this time or to afterwards.
What's the most rewarding aspect of being a junior docent?
I've been in this program since I was about 7 years old, and I think one of the biggest things is that something that Sumaya touched on earlier, and it's the speaking. That feeling of being like a little kid, being put in an adult's position, being put as a art gallery instructor, and just really being able to talk and share and feel like you know more than the adults. That's something that's really formative. That's something that really builds your confidence, and that's something that translates back into school. When there's a public speaking project, you already know that you're going to do fine. You're not scared of the class. You've talked in front of a museum audience. I think the creative writing is also very helpful. John does a great job at getting you in the right headspace to be imaginative and creative. And I think a lot of the friendships and the connections that you make at the camp are also incredibly helpful.
Fantastic, thank you.
I think that just like the skills you learn while in the camp is just really rewarding, and it's absolutely necessary for everyone and anyone. The memories you make and just being able to go and talk, and it's really like you get like really scared when you talk, but then when you end the presentation, everyone's clapping, you get like a sense of just like, wow, I just presented a painting to an audience and I know a lot about the painting.
I really like when I make art here, and then it looks really cool. And then when I show it to my siblings, they're inspired and they want to make art like I did. And, you know, that makes me feel pretty cool.
Another question?
My question is, how did you guys get introduced to it? Are you all like St. Pete natives, or were you introduced by different friends? Because sometimes little, nuggets of good places are hidden, and I feel like this is one of those hidden gems. So just curious how you guys got introduced to it.
My grandma really likes the Dalí Museum, and she's really interested in a lot of it, so she told me a lot about the camp, and I was really excited because she takes me to the museum a lot, especially when I was little, and it got me really interested, so I enrolled in the camp and still love it, and she still takes me. Like, it's really exciting.
Are you native to St.
Yes.
So we actually come from Sanford, a ways up every year to participate in the program. My dad introduced me to the program. He's been here at the museum for a while. He really liked the kind of vibe of the place. He really liked the idea that we could do public speaking. He liked the idea of getting us involved in art and culture. I'm not really certain where he found it, but I'm very glad that he did.
It was a bright summer day, and,
Sometimes you empower students too much.
And, my mom told me, you have a camp to go to. And, I couldn't just sit around all day, doing nothing. She was like, hey, I found a really cool camp for you. So, I came, and it was pretty awesome. Thanks, Mom.
I'd just like to say, as an adult docent, I'm just blown away by your knowledge and your courage. And I just wanted to say thank you for being part of this program and keep up the great work.
One time I sat down and counted up. I know a lot of students who've gone through the program, and I came up with about 8, 9, 10 kids who went through this program and either entered museum work or became artists or were in some sort of art education. A couple of them came back and worked here at the Dalí, in fact, in the volunteer office. So I know personally that this program has an impact on not just the skills you learn generally, but also for people who want to be involved with art and art education in the future. That's not a question. Let me see it. Art education in the future? Did that work?
Yeah.
Okay, it was a
We could hear
statement.
about some of your aspirations, maybe?
Yeah, I would really like to pursue an art. I've never heard of an art curator before, but when me and Nalia went to the Curator event, I started learning more about it, and I actually became really interested in becoming one, and I might pursue that later.
My plan is to stay here as long as possible, and I want to be a volunteer for the camps when I get too old to be in the camp.
Like in the future, whenever I'm like a teenager, I'd like to volunteer for the camp, and then as I get older, if possible, I'd like to become one of the docents, so I can kind of do what I'm already doing with Junior Docent and be able to show off the amazing art that Dalí's created.
I'd like to come back this summer to volunteer again. After that, I plan to go to college, go to UF, go to law school, do some law, hopefully transition into politics, hopefully make a change on a local level.
I want to come back to camp so I can practice my art skills. So when I become a mechanical engineer and a famous comedian,
Halfway there.
yeah, I have the art I need, and yeah.
I'd love to come back next year. I'm definitely gonna terrorize him. My goal is to make beautiful art and then make it into this museum. I'm coming for Dalí. I'm gonna be better than him.
Awesome. And I think that will end it there. Thank you all again so much for joining me. Thank you to the people who helped make this presentation possible. Thank you to each of our Junior Docent ambassadors. And while our program this summer is all sold out, I do invite you for those public tours from 4 to 5 p.m. on those 3 Fridays there. So thank you. That's great. You did a great job.